The world is in turmoil. We are racially divided. Racism divides people into us and them. Racism is social, not natural. It is a personal choice. Racism is tragically effective. Racism is fatal. Racism is demonic. Racism is ugly. Racism is devilish. Racism is inhuman. Racism is barbaric. Racism is against the will of God. Racism is in our hearts and heads. Racists are doomed. Racists are a satire. Racists are a shame. Racists are vicious. There is no valid and valued reasons or excuses for racism. It's just wrong. Retaliation of racially abused people may lead to bloodshed. Retaliation of racially abused people may lead to massacre. Racism leads to cyberbullying. Racism is sparked to online hate. It's a threat to global love and peace. Racism is treasonous. Racism is murder. Racism is vandalism. Racism is hazardous. Racism is ruthless. Racism is evil. It's totally wrong. We are all born equal, with equal abilities and potential. Skin color doesn't define superiority and inferiority. Skin color differ, but we all bleed the same blood. Racism is not genetical. No one was born racial. Racism is not sexually transmitted. Racism is planted, cultivated, and watered. Then sinks into the blood and becomes so normal that one doesn't realize that they were racist to somebody. People are coached and taught to hate one another racially, and that's how it spreads. Racism can spread even by passive socialization. Racism is brute, inherited, fueled orally and passed over from one person to another, taken from homes to streets, shops, sports, pubs, bars, and workplaces. Racism is based on where we come from or the color of our skin. Racism happens when people feel that it's okay to treat others badly as they go about their daily lives. There are no absolute reasons and excuses for racism. It's just wrong. Racism takes many forms and can happen in many places. Racism includes prejudice, discrimination, or passionate hatred directed at someone because of their color, ethnicity, or national origin. There are no reasons and excuses for racism. It's just wrong. Racism can be vented through actions, behavior, and attitude. Racism can be reflected in systems and institutions. Racism sometimes may not be publicly vented yet practiced. Not all racism is obvious, yet it can be clandestinely practiced. There are no reasons or excuses for racism. We don't need lawmakers, human rights activists to condone and condemn racism. Racism is unacceptably wrong. Racism is unacceptably wrong. Racism is more than just words, beliefs, and actions. Racism creates barriers to prevent people from enjoying dignity and equality. Racism is intended to isolate, humiliate, and demean others because of their race. There are no reasons or excuses for racism. It's just wrong. Racism is never right, but it still happens in the world every day. Racism is hate when people make negative comments about a particular ethnic group. You hear and see it when people racially abuse others by racially symbolic names or gestures. You see it when people bully, harass, or intimidate others because of their race. From America, Australia, Asia, via Europe to Africa, racism is wrong. Racists don't want to be racially abused because they know that racism is wrong and most of all, emotionally offensive. Racism is expressed in many different ways. You see it when racists racially write graffiti in public places, buildings, and roads. You see it when people make offensive comments online. You see it when people are excluded from groups because they are of a different color. You see it when people are physically abused because of their race. We have deadly natural disasters and deadly diseases that need immediate attention. The strongest reason for racial division: fighting is useless, meaningless, and stupid. Because racism is just wrong. It's wrong. There are no gadgets to detect racism. There are no machines that can flash racism. There are no doctors and medicine to cure racism. There are no pastors and baptism pools for racism. Let's just take racism away from our hearts and minds. Let's learn to love one another and live together as one. Let's focus on what we have in common and respect our differences. Let's treat others the way we want to be treated. Racism is totally wrong. Racism ends with me. Racism ends with you. Racism ends with all of us. Let's eradicate and totally bury racism. Football is a non-racial entertainment meant to unite people across the globe. Sports are non-racial activities meant for people to enjoy and unite. Winning, losing, drawing, qualifying or not, sports remain a non-racial event. I stand with Jadon Sancho. I stand with the magnificent, marvelous Marcus Rashford. I stand with my brilliant brother Bukayo Saka. I stand with players who were brave enough to take penalties. I stand in solidarity with everyone who has been racially abused. Black, white, colored, Indian, Asian and Chinese. I kneel down, plead, repeat and repeat and repeat. Racism is wrong. Marukufu baguzi warangu. Ich Sachen entzung Rassismo. Diko no all racismo. Now ahu racismo. Janor racisme. Naitaha racisma. Ingen racisma. Fandwei Jongzu Chui. I say no to racism. 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 I am Obert Dube, the ambassador of peace. I am Obert Dube, the African poet. Halalacha.